All right. Next week's presentation. Oh, this is a good one next week. It's by Tran Dang, Leave No One Behind. And if you could only come to 2 Open Circle talks, this would be the other one. Tran and her associate Cesar will join us on April 18 for a discussion of ongoing US immigration reform efforts with a focus on the right to return and its relevance for Jalisco families. Mexico has always been the country most impacted by deportation and is now home to more deported spouses, parents, and children of US citizens, deported veterans, exiled Americans, than any other country in the world. In light of the millions who could benefit from the right to return, the Rhizome Center for Migrants is now leading a binational effort to reunite deported loved ones with their families. Join Tran and Cesar to learn more about these efforts and what you can do individually to support the Rhizome Center for Migrants, the hashtag Right to Return campaign. Okay? All right, now, it's my turn. So this week, hopefully, I'm going to talk about, don't learn Spanish. It's strange, we're here in Mexico. Don't learn Spanish, okay? But do this instead. Now, in 1987, in Durango, Mexico, a young 18-year-old boy called Armando Rodriguez was contemplating his future. He hadn't been a particularly bright student, and 2 years after he left, he still wasn't, his prospects for his future weren't that great. But then his family emigrated to the United States. He knew about a dozen words of English and could count to 10. 12 years later, the LA Times did a front page feature on Armando entitled Crossing Language Barriers. What was so special about Armando that he warranted such attention and interest? Now, when Armando reached Los Angeles, he had no skills and, of course, no English. He got a job as a dishwasher in an Israeli restaurant and kosher eatery called Golan. After 3 years, Armando was fluent in Hebrew. This was what caught the attention of reporters and linguists alike. Most of the workers in the restaurant were Israeli-born, and Hebrew was the language spoken by the workers and most of the customers. Honestly, I don't know how I got it so fast, Armando said. It was like 3 years and I was able to have a conversation. Everybody was always speaking Hebrew in the restaurant. I was only listening to Hebrew. Sometimes people are really surprised, they say. Oh my God, you speak better than me. You speak better than my kids. And I've been paying tons of money for Jewish school. Armando quickly absorbed new words and new phrases by chatting with co-workers and customers. He picked up so much that he never needed to enroll in a formal language class. He learned by observing and listening to co-workers and friends. Armando could not read nor write Hebrew and knew absolutely nothing of its grammar. His Hebrew was evaluated by 5 Israeli-born investigators. 2 thought that he was born in Israel. How is this possible? How can someone reach fluency in a few years without formal instruction? Surely you would have to know something about grammar or the grammatical rules of the language. How can you speak language without knowing grammar? Now, flash back to when you were 6. Now ask yourself that question. Language is a strange beast. I don't think we reflect on language when we embark on learning a new one. And we can learn a lot by considering our first language. It's the only subject in school that we are taught that we already know. Now, language pioneer Noam Chomsky once said, when you are taught rules of your own language in grade school, the chances are very strong that what you are being taught is false. Otherwise, you wouldn't have... One of the things you learn in grade school is the literary language. The literary standard is not what I learned in the streets. Now, the literary standard has certain principles associated with it. some of which are associated with the real language, and some of which are completely artificial. They were made up by people with crazy ideas about language. And the reason you have to teach them is that it is not the person's language. Your actual language, no one teaches you. It just grows in your head. Stick a young child in an environment where everyone is speaking language, and that child can no more help knowing that language than the child can help growing. What we call good English is a system which is partly artificial, which was taught to people because it was legislated to be good English. Some of the rules breaks the rules of any conceivable human language, and that is why it has to be taught over and over again. When I was at school, I had to learn all sorts of complicated nonsense about shall and will, which no one could ever remember. I shall, you will, or some strange thing. You can trace it back to some bishop in the 17th century who invented it and decided that's the way it's supposed to be. Now that kind of thing has to be taught because it is totally artificial. End quote. Now every week, or back in the past, every week, Star Trek's Captain Kirk aboard the USS Enterprise gave its 5-year mission to boldly go where no man has gone before. Now Kirk, to avoid splitting the infinitive and to be grammatically correct, should have said to go bold. But don't you think it sounds a bit weird? It wasn't until the 1800s that the act of splitting the infinitive was considered to be grammatically correct. Before that, that was fine. And perhaps in the distant future, no one will care again. Maybe common sense will answer the following question. If everyone spoke in the incorrect way, would it still be incorrect? Knock, knock. Two. To whom, you illiterate lot? Even if you did know the correct way to use who versus whom, could you explain it? Well, who is nominative case, use it for the subject of a sentence or clause. Whom is objective, that is, uses the object of a verb or a preposition. And to is a preposition. If whatever the pronoun stands for is performing the action of the verb, use who. If it is being acted upon or is the object of a preposition, use whom. What the? Now, no one here consciously passed that joke to check the grammatical correctness of their response. It's not what we do. We don't consciously plan our responses before uttering them. They're just delivered to your mouth and you say them, and hopefully they sound right. There are complex rules between who versus that, me versus I, between versus among. You may know them, or not. You may be concerned about them, but I doubt it. Losing any sleep over them? Nor should you when speaking Spanish. Now, this is not gone unnoticed by English teachers teaching English to English speakers. Dr. LaPoya in a high school in New York, in the Brooklyn, New York, wrote this in 1939. English has always seemed to me to be one of those things which doesn't have to be taught at all, like breathing, for instance, or just growing up. For whether we learn one way of saying things or another way of saying things, the chances are that for all practical purposes, we shall have acquired enough language at any stage of our lives to obtain what we want, talk with people who are willing to talk to us, and listen to those things we want to hear. There is hardly a housewife in some Ozark Mountain hamlet with but 2 or 3 years of a one-room school training who cannot order from the Sears and Roebuck catalogue. And there is hardly a housewife in the city of New York with a high school diploma hanging in her sitting room who need do much better than her Ozark Mountain sister. End quote. Now, of course, we're talking about native English here, but it's the same misconception about teaching our first language, which is so counterproductive in teaching our second language. In English, it's okay to learn about English because we already speak it. But learning about Spanish when we don't already speak it, well, that's not really a path towards communicative competency. and learning Spanish as a way to communicate in it. Imagine a brain surgeon who has read every textbook that existed on brain surgery. He's passed all his exams with flying colors. No one knows more about brain pathology than this man. But he's never set foot in an operating room. He's never met a patient in need of brain surgery. How confident would you feel if you were his first patient to undergo surgery? But why? I hear you ask. Because you instinctively know there's a world of difference between knowledge and skill. Knowledge consists of concepts, principles, mental process committed to memory. We gain knowledge through education. Think about when you were in school. In the traditional model, the teacher gives you information and ideas that you need to memorize. Then the school uses quizzes or exams to make sure that you've retained everything that was taught to you. Now, skills, simply put, are how to do things, how to drive a car, how to paint a picture. These are skills. They are tasks that include a physical component. Unlike knowledge, skills cannot be mastered in a classroom. They can only be completely learned through training, which consists of actually practicing the skill hands-on. Now, part of the skill in speaking and understanding a second language is how to grasp meaning. We often mistakenly believe that what we think in our first language. We think that we think in English. We believe that we're tapping into this warehouse of mental things conveniently labeled in English in our mind. But have you ever thought of something that's sort of, come on, you know what I mean, right? God, what is it called? It's on the tip of my tongue. Now you know what I know what I'm trying to describe. If someone says that word, I will instantly recognize it as the word that I was searching for. Now here's the thing. You could not be thinking about it in English, or you would have known the word. If your understanding of what you wanted to say was in English, there's no way that you could not know the word, or else you wouldn't be able to think about it. The same applies to Spanish as a second language. You will still be thinking in this mental language that we have. We'll call it mentalese, right? This universal grammar, this mentalese in your head. But the trick is going from Spanish to mentalese without passing through English with translation. Now, an Englishman, a Frenchman, and a Spaniard were in a restaurant. The Englishman holds, you all see this? Holds this up, says to the Frenchman, "What do you call this?" The Frenchman says, "Oh, it's a fourchette." He says, "Oh, okay." The Englishman then turned to the Spaniard and said, "Well, what do you call it?" He says, "Oh, we call it a tenedor." He says, "Okay, carry on eating." Now he thinks it's strange. So we ask the Englishman, he says, "Well, what do you call it?" He says, "My dear man, we don't have to call it anything, it's a fork." Now, it could just be British arrogance, but it is more likely it is our conviction that our mental reality resides in our head, in our native language. Does anyone use flashcards here? In Spanish, yeah? Sadly, most flashcards come with translations into English. What you will do is you'll learn to associate the Spanish word with the English translation rather than the mental representation. The mentalese translation, if you will. Flashcards also isolate words. In communication, words die without context. They suffer without emotional attachment. And what about textbooks? We've all got them. Boring lists of drills and memorization, ordered by grammar concepts. Where did this idea come from? Well, 500 years ago, in Western Europe, Latin was still a living spoken language. Now, with the decline of Latin as a spoken language in the 17th century, teaching by translation and rote memorization became the only way to read classic Latin writings. There was no colloquial Latin being spoken. Students were evaluated primarily on written tests, while oral abilities were used simply to read the translations aloud. Now, during the 18th century, in Europe and later in North America, modern languages began to rival Latin in schools. The road approach was simply recycled to teach modern foreign languages, and the grammar translation method emerged. Now, the grammar translation method is based on the theory that the key to communication is knowledge of the rules of the target language. The pull of your existing English grammar knowledge makes it difficult to appreciate the many different grammatical constructs in Spanish. You are searching for grammatical equivalency that might not even exist. You often see the failure of this approach when you hear someone speaking English with Spanish words. The style of teaching is primarily characterized by receiving your Spanish instruction in English. You can see a Spanish course where the primary language is English. This is the grammar translation method. Now, over the past century, linguists began to question the effectiveness of this method. After centuries of dominance, grammar translation method had proven unfit for teaching students to communicate in a new language. Assigning text to translate and grammar rules to memorize had not worked. Using students' first language as the language of instruction had not developed students' abilities to communicate competently. For a start, it's almost impossible to hold conscious rules of grammar in your head at the same time as processing speech for meaning. Now, this is easy to demonstrate, but I'll need a volunteer. A volunteer. Oh. Now, we have a mic over here. I'm going to put my mask back on. Keep your mask on. The only qualifications for being a volunteer is can you climb onto the stage? There you go. I'm going to put this back on. Okay. Now, we've never met before, right? Okay. A lot of people are grateful.
Hello?
Yeah. Okay, you're on? Okay. Now, this is a little exercise that came from a British TV game show called Take Your Pick. This was called the Yes-No interlude. It was a very simple game. What you have to do is engage with me, and I'm going to ask you some questions. Just respond normally. No hesitation, just respond normally. But there's one catch. The rules of English grammar have changed. Yes and no do not exist. All right? So you cannot say yes, you cannot say no. You cannot nod your head, you cannot shake your head. You can't say yeah, nah. Okay? So you with me? So all you have to do is just answer my questions without using yes or no.
In English.
In English? Yes, in English. Don't worry, in English. And so, as I say, you've got a minute, and we'll see how you do. So.
Is there a prize?
Of course, yes. Yes, we've got the Buick parked outside. Okay, so we're starting now. Okay, so your name is?
Susanna.
Susanna, not Suzanne.
I like Susanna because we're in Mexico.
That's very good, very good. And how long have you lived here?
3 months.
3 months?
Good.
Very good, Susanna. And where are you from originally?
Born in Minneapolis.
Born in Minneapolis, and that's the city of brotherly love?
Well, it's the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm. Minnesota.
Okay. And so what do you like to do in your spare time?
I love
Do you have any spare time?
That's true. Here I don't. It's
don't?
such a busy place.
Are you busy?
Good.
Oh, no. No, this is a tough nut to crack, isn't it?
Okay.
But you, and it's Susanna, right?
Love it.
Okay. Stop encouraging her. All right. So it's very nice. Do you do your own hair? It's very nice.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful. Can I have another volunteer, please? So anyway, okay, so you're in the city of brotherly love, and you don't do your hair, but you make your own dresses, obviously. You make your own clothes. Did you knit that yourself?
This came from the Tuesday market.
Oh, the Tuesday market. Close, you came close there. It's very nice. And what will it be when it's finished? No, it's very nice. It's very attractive. Oh, that's great. And so let's see. So, what you got plans for this year?
I do.
Where are you going? Are you going to travel
To
anywhere?
Tahoe.
Have you got to where?
Tahoe for
Tahoe,
the
Lake
summers.
Tahoe in California? Did I hear sea?
You did.
You can't do that either.
Oh, I can't do that?
No, sea.
Oh, sea.
That's equivalent to saying yes.
Love Tahoe.
Okay.
Love Tahoe.
It's great, isn't it?
Magnificent.
Hmm?
Magnificent.
Okay. Okay, and how long are you going to be there?
6 months.
6 months. Oh, 6 months. So you're going to stay there? You got a cabin by the lake, or?
A little place.
Yeah. Okay, that's nice. Is it close to the lake?
Very close.
Yeah.
Walking distance.
Oh, that's great. You going to go gambling? You a gambling person?
I'm not a gambler.
You don't. You ever go to the casinos in Reno?
Too
Well,
much,
you don't have to go to Reno, do you?
Too much smoke.
Oh, yeah. It's a bit, it's bad, isn't it? You don't smoke. Have you ever smoked?
Not cigarettes.
Oh. Confession time. It's confession time. Well, Susanna, I think our time's up. You did very well.
Woo! Thank you.
And I'm gonna call her on that scene. I didn't know she was going to be that good. Normally, it doesn't take very long to get someone to say yes or no. It's because it's just very difficult to hold meaning in your mind and remember a grammar rule. The guy who did it, Michael Miles, he was a master. He got 99% of them. Me, I'm just an amateur. I just play these. Okay. All right. So let's see. One of the keys to communicative competency is bypassing conscious grammatical rules. But how are you going to acquire a language simply by not doing something? And obviously you are not. Acquiring language is not a passive exercise, despite it being more subconscious than conscious learning. So let's look at these things from the very beginning. First thing to do, expose yourself. So let me finish. Expose yourself to as much Spanish as possible. Surround yourself with the spoken language, preferably Mexican Spanish. There are millions of Spanish language videos on YouTube. If you're in the car, sometimes you can get a radio channel down here. There are millions of resources on the internet for Spanish. Now, what you're doing is really just tuning your mind to the sounds and the rhythms of Spanish. At this point, it's all noise. You're not really going to pick up much of the language. You're not going to learn it, but it's just to get used to the sounds. Now, later you can, language experts agree that watching TV shows in a foreign language can help someone learn that language if done with near obsession. These stories are hugely common. A New York Times story told about professional baseball players from Latin America who learned English watching Friends, the TV series Friends, over and over again. Philadelphia Phillies shortstop Freddie Galvis told the Times that he had watched every episode of the 10-season show at least 5 times. You got to admire him. Now, a telenovella's our salvation. Now, watching bad acting with ridiculous logic-bending plots might be your thing if the steamy kisses are a sufficiently compelling payoff. And if so, you're lucky, because telenovelas are everywhere. And unfortunately, with telenovelas, you don't have to learn a new plot every time. Now, the best strategy is to pick a subject that you know and love. Something that is so compellingly interesting that you will work to understand it. As you progress, the content occupies your mind more than the fact that it is in Spanish. And this is your goal. Read lots of books, but don't read a book that you would not read in English. Read something you love. Your interest will be the motor that pushes you to continue the struggle. Obviously, it has to be somewhat understandable, but if you choose a subject or topic you are interested in, you already know the gist of what's being explained. and compelling subject matter makes it easier to reread. Yeah, you have to read it more than once. If you're a pure beginner, you could choose books for children, the Spanish equivalent of See Spot Run. The trouble is, watching Spot Run is not very compelling. Challenge yourself with a graphic novel or comic book. Get your meaning and context from the images, but not by translating. Don't run to your English-Spanish dictionary to translate a word. Let it percolate for a while. Try and deduce the meaning. A Spanish dictionary or a Spanish big picture dictionary would be great, but avoid, if you can, a translation dictionary. Remember, knowing English is an impediment. Avoid it like the plague. Now, there are some books specifically aimed at adult beginners, short little stories at various levels. They're all available on Amazon and Audible and Kindle. One of my favorites is the Lola Largo series. Lola Largo is a private detective in Madrid, and she solves cases, and it's very accessible Spanish. There's another series, Pepa Villa. Pepa Villa is a taxi driver in Barcelona. Now, this is a little more risque. Peppa likes her booze and she likes her men. In one book, a friend is going to hospital to have breast implants, and of course, chaos and hilarity ensue, all at a low intermediate Spanish level. Now, read the same passage in a book, one that you understand, out loud, once a day until you can't take it anymore. Or sing the lyrics in Spanish of a song you know in English. There are lots of translated songs, some of them translated faithfully, others not. Who hasn't heard some group down here belting out A Mi Manera and recognize it obviously as Frank Sinatra's My Way? If you like the song, learn it in Spanish. Sing it every day. It's good revenge on noisy neighbors. Read and sing out loud and let your subconscious hear it, absorb it, and acquire it. Now, we're looking for meaning. Stephen Krashen, professor of linguistics at UCLA, claims that the only way to acquire a second language is via meaning. He claims that the only way to acquire a second language is when we receive messages that we understand. We might not know how we understand it, but we have grasped the gist. Krashen gave a talk on second language acquisition, and in it he demonstrated the importance of exposure to messages we can understand. In a talk to second language teachers, he gave 2 lessons in German to demonstrate the difference. Now, he chose German as he assumed no one would speak German, and also he is fluent in German. As I cannot pronounce German, I'm going to give the same lesson in Spanish. I'm sure that native Spanish speakers out there will probably tell you that I don't know how to pronounce Spanish either. But these lessons are for people who know little or no Spanish. So here are a few minutes of his talk. Excuse me a second. If Spanish is it, the question that becomes, how do we acquire? I will give you 2 quick Spanish lessons, and you can tell me which one of these lessons would help you acquire Spanish. Now, this is aimed at the person who speaks know a little Spanish. Lesson number 1. You ready? Yes. Para el oyente, las supraestructuras están vinculadas a otras unidades de representación. Es temática de las acciones e interacciones sociales, como los marcos o los guiones. Dan un base de conocimiento relativamente invariable en condiciones normales que facilita la realización de inferencias casuales hacia adelante, hacia atrás y durante la comprensión de textos orales y escritos. What do you think? Good lesson?
No.
You think if I kept talking to you like that, you would pick up Spanish?
No.
Very slowly, if at all. Here's lesson number 2. You have to watch. Esta es mi mano. ¿Mano? ¿Entienden?
Sí.
¿Bien? Esta es mi cabeza. ¿Entienden? ¿Entienden? Cabeza. Estas son mis orejas. Orejas. Tengo 2 orejas. Una oreja, 2 orejas. Estos son mis ojos. Ojos. Un ojo, dos ojos, tres ojos. ¿Tengo tres ojos? Sí, no, no. Dos ojos. Esta es mi boca. Boca. ¿Entienden? Y mis labios. Mis labios. ¿Entienden? Mis labios necesitan lápiz labial. ¿Sí? No. Los hombres no usan lápiz labial. Las mujeres, sí, pues a veces sí, a veces no. As a beginning Spanish speaker, if you understood lesson number 2, I did everything necessary to teach you Spanish. We acquire language in only one way. This is the big moment. When we understand messages, that's it. We've tried everything else. We have tried teaching grammar. We have tried getting students to memorize vocabulary, dialogue, sit in front of machines. Next, we'll try electric shock. We have tried everything. But the only thing that works, the only thing that counts, is giving people messages that they can understand. What we now call comprehensible input. We acquire language when we understand what people tell us, what is said, not how it is said. Notice that when we teach a language, today we do the opposite. We give students a rule, and then we have them practice a rule in production. And then we tell them whether they got it right or wrong. So that was Krashen's talk to secondary teachers, language teachers. Now, what is happening is that once those sounds that you hear have meaning, your brain is going to organize those sounds and link them to your mental ease. If you can grasp meaning, you have enough information for the brain to work on consolidating and improving your understanding of Spanish. This happens at a subconscious level. You have no conscious access to your mental ease. You cannot consciously organize by having knowledge of grammar. Now, it's challenging finding Spanish that is both comprehensible and compelling. Now, it shouldn't be completely comprehensible. It should be about 10% that you cannot understand. So that is the bit that you're going to learn, and then you'll take it 10% more. The best predictor of success in a second language is motivation. Interest is the best teacher. Now watch Spanish language movies. Choose dub movies to begin with. The Spanish is more neutral. There's less slang. And always resist the temptation to translate in your head. Just absorb the sound and look at the context. You're not interested in translation, only meaning. Pay attention and be aware of what is being said. And know that it will be a while before it is clear what is happening. Watch it again and again. This is why it has to be compelling. Use subtitles at first. I prefer Spanish subtitles, but if you're struggling, English subtitle. But just make sure that the last time you watch it, there are no subtitles. You can spend your day narrating your life in Spanish. It's preferable that you do this out loud, unless you're in a public place, then you have to use your inside your head voice. At some point, you're going to have to utter some words in Spanish to someone else. One parameter, which is a natural feature of learning a second language as a child, is poorly tolerated in the grammar translation method. And that is making mistakes. I have never seen a course or class that permits you to make a mistake. They always want to correct you. And yet mistakes are an inevitable, if not necessary, step in acquiring language. There's also a predictable order of errors you can expect when learning Spanish from English. There is a different set of errors when Spanish speakers are learning English, but it's very predictable. Linguists have studied this forever. So the studies have also shown that with repeated exposure, these errors get resolved without anyone correcting you. Everybody wants to be corrected, but if you have a lot of exposure, it is not necessary. It will come naturally. And you may not be ready to receive the correction. You may not be at that stage. Things will start to sound right, or not. But recognizing sounding right is a monumental step. Finding a native Spanish speaker who can adjust their Spanish to your comprehension is invaluable. Get yourself a Mexican boyfriend or girlfriend. Married, you say? We all have to make sacrifices. Get adopted by a Mexican family. Sponsor a kid for their school uniform and school supplies. And then get to know the family. Go to church. Obviously the Spanish services. God will forgive you if you are the wrong denomination, and he will be overjoyed if you're an atheist. Sit near the speakers on the wall because the church acoustics are terrible when you're struggling to understand in the first place. Get involved in local projects. Want to help with making the scenery in Ajijic's Easter Passion Play? Volunteer, join in. He'll take anyone. How do I know? They took me. Trust me, no previous skill required. Go to a local soccer game here in Ajijic. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon, there are several teams playing. It will cost a whopping 10 pesos for an afternoon of games. There are 2 soccer fields on Revolucion, one at the top, one at the bottom, with the charo in the middle. It's the street where the Tianguis is on Wednesdays. Now bring a cushion if the concrete isn't soft enough for you. But it's a great community atmosphere, and everyone will want to talk to you. Because they just don't see gringos at these soccer matches. They think it's great that you're there. Sponsor a kid and buy soccer shoes. I can put you in touch if you like, and get to know the family. It's the main thing. Eat at the street taco stands. It's a bit controversial. Or the stands in the Tianguis. Look for the ones with lots of people and high turnover. The restaurant that has a couple of customers every night is much more likely to be not throwing away the food, and it's a bit riskier. Engage in a greeting or two. It is a communal eating situation, and it's not difficult to strike up a conversation. Now, if by chance the next day the food is making a quicker passage through your body than expected, then look upon that trip to the pharmacy as an opportunity to practice your Spanish. Have you noticed that you use words like tianguis, carretera, malacon, plaza, etc., without thinking of the English translation? There are plenty of Spanish words that you have already absorbed and don't have to think too much about saying them. Buenos dias, ¿cómo estás? Sí, no, por favor, gracias. These have a direct link in your mind between Spanish and your mental representation, with your mental ease. You don't have to go through English for those words. And you hear them all the time. You use them and you understand how they are used. So you don't consciously think about them. Imagine if all your Spanish were like that. That's the goal. What happens if you try to communicate and you don't understand a word that's being said back to you? A common occurrence. Practice a few Spanish phrases that lets the conversation partner know that you're just starting to learn Spanish and you are afraid you cannot understand much. And smile. They will understand. I've yet to meet a Mexican who does not appreciate an attempt to speak to them in Spanish, especially here, and show an interest in Mexico and its culture. If you ask them to slow down, I found that they slow down for about 2 sentences, and then they're off to the races again. But, eventually you can remind them to slow down. A little story about Ben Franklin. You all know Ben Franklin? When Ben Franklin arrived in France as the US ambassador, he was a hit in political and scientific circles. He had learned French, mainly from reading French literature, and he was amazed that no one in Paris spoke that particular dialect. He had very little idea of what was being said to him. So he just dove in and picked it up as he went along. One of his early French colleagues commented on Ben's command of the language. Dr. Franklin was reported to speak French very well, but I found upon attending him critically that he did not speak it grammatically. And upon my asking him sometimes whether a phrase he had used was correct, he acknowledged to me that he was wholly inattentive to the grammar. 2 years later, John Adams was to arrive in France as the trade commissioner. Now, Adams, a little more serious person, was shocked by the manner in which Franklin was so at ease with French politics of the time, which involved as much socializing and conversations as it did hard bargaining. Adams, unaccustomed to serious politics being accompanied by such apparent frivolity in the salons of Paris, did not remain as a commissioner in France for long. One French commentator who knew them both remarked on their approaches to speaking French. Perhaps its clearest manifestation was in the two men's approach to the French language. The divide disguised a more essential truth. One man was trying very hard, while the other did not appear to be trying at all. Excuse me. 8 days after his arrival in Paris, Adams registered his disillusionment at the state of Franklin's French, which he had assumed was fluent. He was startled to note that his colleague's grammar was inexact, and even more surprised to hear Franklin confess when queried that he paid no attention to the stuff. Adams also complained. His pronunciation too, upon which the French gentlemen and ladies compliment him, and which he seems to think is pretty good, I'm sure is very far from being exact. Adams assumed that the diligent approach to learning French was superior to that of Franklin. But colleagues who knew them both said Adams and Franklin spoke French equally badly. However, Franklin achieved much as ambassador and apparently had a marvelous time in France. Adams returned miserable to the US and achieved very little. Now, Franklin was obviously not perfect, but how perfect do you have to be in a language in order to use it? We don't learn a language to use it. We use a language in order to learn it. Now, remember Armando, a Hebrew-speaking young man from Durango? He was involved in a tragic car accident in Arizona. He was heading back to Mexico to visit the rest of his family for Christmas. In it, his mother died, and he was seriously hurt. He suffered severe head injuries that put him in a coma for 2 weeks and left him hospitalized for 2 months. When he came out of the coma, he didn't know who he was, where he was, or why he was in hospital, but he could still speak Hebrew. During his recovery, Armando recalls with gratitude the family of the restaurant owner who flew to Arizona to visit him in the hospital. He said that someone from the restaurant would call him nearly every day until he returned to work after several months of recuperation. He now works as head waiter in a famous kosher Italian restaurant in Beverly Hills called La Gondola, still practicing or still using or improving his Hebrew. So what does Armando and others in similar situations tell us? Well, surround yourself in Spanish, sights and sounds. Seek Spanish that you can understand and is of compelling interest to you. Meaning is everything. Avoid your native language, speaking, listening, and reading. Don't translate. Forget learning grammar rules. Look for classes that do not teach Spanish using English. Avoid textbooks and any book that promises instant success. Instant success doesn't exist. Don't worry about mistakes. Don't ask for correction. Make Mexican friends. Get involved in the local community. Help out where you can. Learn and embrace the culture of Mexico and attend Mexican celebrations and events. I will finish with one quote that sums up the adventure awaiting us. Language is the music with which we charm the serpents guarding another's treasure. Thank you very much.